Hello there, and welcome back to the Codex. So, last night, as in Sunday, the reset of this week, due to the fact that I've been keeping up on doing every single daily challenge since this Nightwave came out, along with the weeklies, of course, I have finally unlocked the Burning Hate augment, and boy, do we need to talk about it. So let's go ahead and hop over to the arsenal and take a look at this. So, this is the build that we are rocking right now for the Burning Hate setup. First, let's look at the mod itself. So Burning Hate, what it does is, when hate damages enemies inflicted with heat status, they become vulnerable, that's an important word, to 120% more status damage. So last night on stream, did multiple hours of testing with this, and some of the things that I've verified are exactly what I was hoping I'd verify. So this mod is actually insane because, first of all, when it says when hate damages enemies inflicted with heat status, notice the very particular wording there. You don't need to have heat damage on your actual hate. You can prime an enemy with heat from another source, like an Epitaph, for example, or your companion that has heat damage on it. And then after whatever other source puts a heat proc on them, if the hate damages them, it will activate this debuff. Secondly, when it says, I did not mean to just take that off. When it says they become vulnerable to 120% more status damage, vulnerability and extra damage are not the same thing. This 120% status damage is not the same as the 90% status damage from Melee Elementalist. These are multiplicative with each other because Melee Elementalist makes you deal 90% more status damage. Burning Hate makes the enemies more vulnerable to status damage. It makes them take more status damage by 120%. So these multiply off of each other. This is not 120 plus the 90 just equals 210%. No, it's this 2.2 multiplier times this 1.9 multiplier equals a total 4.18 times damage multiplier, or otherwise referred to as a 318% status damage increase, is what this actually turns out to be. This is also multiplicative with the Bane mods, in this case the Smite mods for Melee. Smite mods triple dip Melee influence, which is going to be the whole point of this build, is we're going to be synergizing all this with Melee influence. So typically Smite mods slash Bane mods, they already double dip all dot effects, but when you introduce Melee influence into the mix and you spread your status through influence, that introduces a third instance of damage, and it makes the Bane dip a third time. So this is 1.55 times 1.55 times 1.55, which is a total 3.72 times damage multiplier, or again referred to as a 272% damage increase. All of these multiplied together, Burning Hate times Melee Elementalist, I can't speak, times the Smite mod, is a total 15.56 times status damage multiplier, or a 1,456% damage increase. Now, another fun fact that I've verified with the Burning Hate augment here is that it counts melee influence damage as damage that the hate has dealt. So if you prime a whole huge crowd of enemies with heat damage, and then you trigger an electric proc on one enemy and it travels to another enemy 20 meters away, that enemy 20 meters away that wasn't actually hit by the hate itself, but it was hit by a melee influence proc triggered by the hate, will have this Burning Hate debuff applied to them. So this is a truly delicious mod. So this is the build. You will notice perhaps the weirdest thing about this is that there's no base damage mod on here. We're not using Prime Pressure Point. The reason for that is because when you activate the Incarnate form of the hate, it gives you that 20% sprint speed, 20% parkour velocity. It makes you fire out those nice exploding blades, but it also gives you 100% base melee damage. So when doing some math on the build, I realized that I was actually able to drop melee damage. For example, Burning Hate, for the purposes of just the status damage alone, is actually a higher damage increase than Prime Pressure Point, because Pressure Point, if I were to put it on this build, when I already have 100% damage from the evolution, would only be about an 82.5% damage increase. And this is a 120% damage increase for status effects. So I dropped Pressure Point for that. Also, in terms of the rest of the evolutions. Let's go over those. So for the first one, we took the base damage goes up by 30, and we get the 100% combo count chance. For the second one, I'm taking the 0.8 range. Some people would consider taking the 10-second combo duration instead, but I would rather just use 2 of the Arcane Dexterity Arcanes. So use Arcane Dexterity on your primary and your secondary, and that will give you 15 seconds of combo duration. And especially if you use that alongside Naramon, combo will never be an issue. So I'm going to take the 0.8 range, especially because we don't have Prime to reach on this build. So this is the only source of extra range that I'm able to get. Now for the last evolution, this one will surprise some people. Instead of using just the pure crit one, which is the plus 10% base crit chance, I'm actually using the Subtle Force, the hybrid crit status chance. This gives plus 6% base crit chance, so a little bit less, but it also gives 10% more base status chance. Now this is a basically 50% total status chance increase because the normal base status is only 20, so going from 20 to 30 increases your status scaling with Weeping Wounds by 50%. So this build ends up like over 160% crit chance. Let's go ahead and verify that. So 30, the math here is 30 times, that would be 5.4. So yeah, 162% crit chance on this build, just because of Weeping Wounds and the base status chance. So that's really important because this is a melee Elementalist build, and thanks to Blood Rush and still having 36% crit chance, we're still hitting basically all orange crits. So that's why I went with that. Now let's go back to the build here just to make sure. So again, melee influence, smite mod's really important, although if you don't want to use a smite mod, you will be losing a ton of damage. But I do want to throw this in here. If you're one of the people that just hates using smite mods because you don't want to have to deal with moving the mod around depending on what faction you're fighting, just put Pressure Point there. It'll be less damage for the status effects, but you won't have to worry about swapping the Banes around. So just re-slot in Prime Pressure Point, and you're good to go. For the purposes of this video, I am going to show the Smite mod, just to show you how much damage this can really do. Now, we are using some other aspects of our loadout as well to really beef this up. The Epitaph, we're using a Viral Heat build. This is the one that I'm using. This is just to really easily prime heat damage on huge crowds of enemies. That way we can actually trigger that Burning Hate debuff, because again, they need to have a heat proc on them to trigger the status vulnerability from hate hitting them. Again, I'm using secondary dexterity just to help out the hate build to keep that combo duration going. We're using Amalgam Barrel Diffusion just for the dodge speed, and the reason why we're not using Galvanized is because we're not going to be getting any actual kills with this weapon. So Galvanized Diffusion would only give 110% multi-shot, which is actually the same as this. So it's no problem at all. Same reason we're using Sure Shot instead of Galvanized Shot. We're not going to be getting any kills, so we would not be triggering the damage bonus, and this gives less status chance. Prime Fulmination is really good because it gives you an extra 4.4 meters of explosion radius, so this just helps you hit more people with those heat procs. Now, your primary, I would also recommend running just literally any primary, because the only mod that matters is Shivering Contagion, because it turns out Shivering Contagion does not just apply to your primary, it actually applies to your entire loadout. So Shivering Contagion will make the forced cold procs from your Epitaph spread to other nearby enemies, so very often you'll be shooting the Epitaph, and it'll just freeze whole crowds of enemies, because the one guaranteed cold proc per enemy will be spread to every other enemy, which means that they'll be getting way more than one cold proc, and if they get 10, then they're frozen solid, so it's really funny. For the companion, we're going to be running Nautilus with this build. The Contagious Bond and Duplex Bond is really important here. This combination means that you can have multiple copies of your Sentinel flying around, and all shooting their Verglasses and all spreading stats effects. So this is going to be really good. Manifold Bond lets them use Cordon more. Cordon is really good for a melee build because it's going to be grouping up enemies for you. Now, to increase the heat damage on the Verglass, we are also using Fired Up. This gives you a free 100% heat weight, basically, 100% extra heat damage. And then on the Verglass itself, we are using a Viral Heat build. So this will also be helping us prime heat, and it will also be priming Viral for us. So it's a large damage increase, and it helps us spread those needed heat procs for the build. So let's go ahead and hop into a Steel Path Lua Conjunction Survival, be around level 200 on Steel Path. The frame that I'm using, it doesn't have any buffs that affect melee, so I made sure there's no buffs here. This is just to keep me alive, basically, and none of my Archon shards affect my damage. I do have a Corrosive shard on, but we're not doing any corrosive damage, so this won't do anything. Alright, so let's hop in that mission. There was actually a Fissure up right now, so I was able to hop at that instead, so it's even higher level enemies, which is nice. It's level 203 to 205 instead of 180 to 200. So even better for the purposes of testing this. So keep your Epitaph out and just prime the groups of enemies. And after I get a couple kills here, I'll get my much better attack speed because I'm using Berserker Fury. Let me activate that Incarnate form.
The corrupted enemies are dropping reactant. Collected to open your void vents. We're going to need
Now with the Incarnate form active, you'll see that we're doing the real damage here. Let's get a bigger group of enemies right now. Yeah, you see those electric procs spreading all over the place? So many damage numbers. So I passed 100 kills already, and that was with the startup time. As you can see, this is it's quite nice when you really build around this augment. It definitely tears up enemies. And the priming is super easy. You just fire 1-2 shots at the Epitaph, and you prime everyone within 14 meters of where the shot lands. Got a huge radius.
You have collected enough reactants to open your
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan. I've always loved melee influence as well. And this basically just beefs it up even more. I think you just saw that cordon go off from my Nautilus. Again, making it super easy to get those enemies grouped up. Which again, for the purposes of this build, is a huge damage increase, because you want people as tightly packed as they can be. I feel like 20 guys there. I just killed that whole hallway. I didn't even see them. You can see every time that you start wailing on like 1 or 2 enemies, it's like 15 enemies around you that die just from the influence proc spreading. Yeah, we're at 330 kills already. So well over 100 KPM. We'll see what we're at. What we're at once we get to the actual 3-minute mark in a moment here. That's the 358. So easily over 100 KPM. We got 5 seconds left on our Incarnate form here. Just make sure that you watch out for that 3-minute timer on the Incarnate form. You gotta redo that every 3 minutes, so you don't accidentally go running around without any Incarnate buff active. I just re-triggered mine, so that's another 3 minutes. We are, of course, going to hang out here until the Acolyte shows up to see how it performs against him. And a little bit of a spoiler for you. It's going to be really good. Yeah, I'm just having a great fun with the setup last night, testing it. I also really look forward to that Dread augment coming out later. I'll definitely be covering that, so make sure you're subbed if you want to see that video when it goes live. Yeah, in terms of ease of use, killing entire crowds of enemies with melee, it doesn't really get much better than this. Got some sentient troopers coming in. I'm sure that'll be a real challenge. They spawn in yet?
But if you need to leave, extract
Why would I need to leave, Lotus? Come on. That's right, I forgot this was a fisher.
These manifestations must not be allowed a foothold on Lua. Life support is at risk.
Hello, Thrax. How you doing? I picked up our acolyte, buddy. How you doing, bud? Get out of here. Goodbye. Alright, let me actually finish dealing with this Thrax. So yeah, as you guys can see, very good weapon. Definitely does not have issues clearing out crowds of enemies. And the augment adds a huge amount of status damage, so those electric procs that you're spreading via influence are doing monumentally more damage with the addition of this mod. I just wanted to showcase that. Let's hop back to the ship here, alright? Alright, back safe and sound in our orbiter. Well, that was fun. Yeah, guys, I love this augment. I also, like I said, I can't wait to get access to the rank 25 Unseat Dread augment. I'm actually looking even more forward to that one. So, like I said, you can definitely expect a video on that when it comes out. But if you guys liked this video, if you found it helpful, consider dropping a sub and a like. It really helps a ton. Helps the video get out there to more people. If any of you have unlocked this augment as well for Burning Hate, or whenever you guys do unlock it, after you use it for yourselves a little bit, I'm very interested in the comments to see what you guys think about it. Do you like it? Do you think it's worth using? Do you think it's not worth using? How do you feel about slotting into a build? Just let me know down below. I'm always interested in your guys' input. Anyways, it's been fun, and I'll see you guys in the next one.